Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Yet, we all seem to be fools at one point in our life. And if we're not fools ourselves, we have the names and the addresses of friends that are fools and have been fooled over and over again. Let me tell you about one of my friends. She was crying one night as she called me, and she said, "You're not going to believe what just happened to me." I said, "Kath," I said, "what happened?" She said, "I went to the gas station. A very nice young man came over and filled my tank, took my credit card, and never came back." I said, "So did you go in the store?" "I went in the store, but the gas station has no gas pumpers. That man doesn't work for the gas station." So she was without a credit card. This same woman calls me again, crying hysterically. And I try to be a good friend, but I said the wrong thing. I said, "What now?" It was not the right thing to say. She says, "You're not going to believe this." And I said, "Try me, because we've been so many other places together before." She says, "My car was stolen." I said, "Your car was stolen?" She says, "Yes." She says, "I took her to the car wash, and you know me," she says, "Patrick, I like to dilly-dally and look at all the different air fresheners and everything else. And I walk out, and I'm waiting for my car. I'm waiting for my car, and the car never comes." So I went up to one of the people cleaning the cars. I said, "Is my car someplace else?" And they said, "What kind of car?" And she says, "A blue Toyota." "Oh, your husband took that a while ago." None of us likes to be scammed. And if you were to meet this woman today, you would find her to be a very hardened individual, because she has low tolerance of other people. She is a very suspicious woman. She finds herself untrusting of other people because of her experience. She finds herself always second-guessing what people's motives are and what's it all about. She refuses to be scammed ever again. She wants clear evidence before she commits that things will work out in her favor. Well, let's talk about those folks who were quite surprised on Easter morning. But before we talk about that, let's talk about those folks in that upper room at the Last Supper. See, these are people who have given their lives to Jesus Christ. They have given up everything to follow the Lord Jesus. They give up their livelihood, their pursuit of their careers. They gave up their relationships in order to give their life devoutly to Jesus. And it was a great run. It was an incredible run. Be attached to such a great teacher. And he did wonderful things, marvelous things. He healed people. That Syrophoenician woman, healed her. That woman with the hemorrhage for 20-some-odd years, he healed her. That blind man who couldn't be pushed in the pool, he healed him. He even raised his friend Lazarus from the dead. It was a great thing going. Everything seemed to be proceeding so nicely. He was even so bold to take on the leaders of the people and challenge the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the chief priests of the people. But now, at the end of their time, it seems, it's not going the way it's supposed to go. They're all sitting down having a nice Passover supper, and all of a sudden they see Jesus commanding them to pay attention to him, and everyone's getting set for a nice, encouraging speech. You know, one of you is going to betray me, but you know, we're going to rally together, and we're going to tackle this guy, and we're going to mess this guy up so this guy doesn't destroy our plan. But perhaps it was the most unsettling after-dinner speeches one could experience. One of you will betray me. God has a plan. I will suffer. You'll be scattered. And the third day, I will rise again. My friends, this is not, I suspect, what they were expecting to hear. And then they find themselves seeing their teacher, their friend, their rabbi, crucified on the cross like any other common criminal. How could they not help but feel scammed? Like they were fools. They'd given themselves to an idea, to a person who seemingly just did not work out. And if we've ever been scammed, we know the experience. We feel deflated, we feel exhausted, we feel stripped, we find ourselves just flattened. But we know that is not the end of the story. There's a painting in a gallery called Checkmate. And if any of you have played chess, you know well you get to a point and you try your best to get to checkmate. And so the picture is of this somewhat sinister individual with this very pleasant individual playing this game of chess. And an artist supposedly walks by and says, "What a great picture." But the artist looks more closely and says, "It's very interesting." Because while this picture seems to acknowledge that there's a checkmate, in fact, there's one more move. And my friends, when we looked at that cross, when those first disciples looked at that cross, I suspect they saw a checkmate. That evil had won out, that it was all over, it was time to go home. But God had one more move. God raised Jesus from the dead, and that's why we are a victorious people. That's why we share in the glory of these days, in the magnificence of these moments. Because their victory is our victory. Their joy is our joy. It's almost like the fact that how many of us actually played Mega Millions and lost? How many of us play Mega Millions on a regular basis and lose? And yet when we see that one person who struggled all their life and won those Mega Millions, that person's victory is our victory because we know they struggled. So what are the implications for us? My students speak about this business of stick-to-itiveness. Stick-to-itiveness. In Marian terms, we talk about fidelity, and we speak about Mary's fidelity. So one of the great images we have of Our Lady is Mary at the foot of the cross. She stuck it out to the end. And there's something about sticking it out to the end that makes the victory even sweeter, even more joyful. Now, I know Father Piba told you that I'm a Yankee fan. And I know that's not good here in Phillies and Eagles territory. But I do know a little bit about the Eagles, much about your sadness, your dismay, your horrible team. But this is going to be the season, I'm sure. And if you remember back a couple of seasons ago, they were doing pretty poorly. And when a team does pretty poorly, what happens? You know they're doing poorly. Not only because they're not getting as much TV time, but also when they do get the TV time, you look around the stadium and you see less and less people. and it seemingly gets less and less. People just give up for the season and they go home. But then that following season, if you remember, they turned it around. And for the people who stood by the Phillies, the joy that was theirs was greater because they stood by their team. In our lives, we're challenged. We're challenged by sickness, disease. We're challenged by hardship. We're challenged by pain. We're challenged by sorrow. And one of the great postures of our day is to wish people well, good luck, goodbye, and I pray for you. But it's a matter of standing with, of being present, of being attentive to those who are suffering in sorrow and in pain. Because in many respects, those people who are suffering in sorrow and pain might themselves feel as though they're being scammed by our God. And it has to be our posture to be women and men who remind them by our presence and by our prayers that God is very close to them. So we know well when Mary answers our prayers, when our God vindicates us from our sickness and our disease and our illness, our pain, if we've actually entered deeply into it and allowed our God to be close to us and through the presence of others, we know that victory is ours, that hope is ours, that promise is ours. And we know well that despite the fact that others might tell us that God might have abandoned us, we know we have a God who is close to us, we know we have a God who is victorious, and we know we have a God who will never scam us.